May 31st, 1223. Picture it, an immense expanse of what is now called Ukraine, where 80,000 men are about to face the most brutal lesson warfare has ever taught. A dense cloud of dust fills the air, mingling with the sharp tang of fear. Bodies lay strewn across the steppe like discarded dolls, the cries of the dying echoing amidst the thunderous hooves. By nightfall, roughly 90% of these fighters will be gone. Their leaders will be crushed beneath a platform celebrating victory, as Mongol commanders feast above them. The few who survive will carry a dire warning back to Europe, a warning that will be dismissed for 14 years until it's almost too late. How could a force of 20,000 horsemen decimate an army 4 times its size? How do you transform your adversary's overconfidence into their doom? This narrative recounts the most flawlessly executed military ambush in history, where hubris clashed with genius and an entire civilization paid dearly. Stay with me, as what you are about to discover will alter your perception of conflict, military planning, and the precarious balance between predator and prey. To grasp the origins of this disaster, we must journey back 3 years and traverse 5,500 miles across some of the planet's harshest terrain. In 1220, Genghis Khan had just completed the annihilation of the Khwarezmian Empire, then one of Central Asia's most formidable powers. The Shah had made the critical error of executing Mongol envoys, and Genghis responded with a campaign of systematic devastation that forever linked his name with catastrophe. Yet, as the great Khan was consolidating his conquests, 2 of his most brilliant generals requested permission for what they termed a reconnaissance mission. These generals were Jebe and Subutai, 2 of Genghis Khan's 4 dogs of war, the elite officers he trusted above all others. Now, Jebe's story alone merits a moment's reflection, as it illuminates the Mongols' operational philosophy. This man was once an enemy of Genghis Khan. In 1202, during the Mongol unification conflicts, an archer named Jurkadai shot and killed Genghis Khan's horse from under him during a battle. After Genghis triumphed, he Saprat who displayed such audacity. Jurkadai stepped forward, admitting, "That was me. You can either execute me now or spare me, and I will become your most devoted servant." Genghis, struck by the man's courage and honesty, not only spared him, but renamed him Jebe, meaning arrow, and elevated him to general. Within 3 years, Jebe commanded the crucial left flank in the invasion of Jin China. This illustrates meritocracy pushed to an almost astonishing degree, a key factor in the Mongols conquering half the known world. Subutai's ascendance was equally extraordinary. Born a commoner, the son of a blacksmith with no royal lineage, he joined Genghis Khan's forces at merely 14 years old. By his early 20s, he was leading the vanguard of Mongol armies. Genghis referred to him as one of his 4 dogs of war, warriors who would crush through cliffs and grind boulders to grit. These were not men bound by traditional warfare. They were innovators, audacious strategists, and possessed an understanding of combat that, frankly, is unsettling to contemplate. So when they sought permission to advance westward from Persia, through the Caucasus, and into the European steppes, Genghis granted it. What followed was a 3-year campaign spanning over 5,500 miles. They tore through Azerbaijan, twice defeated the Kingdom of Georgia with feigned retreats and pincer maneuvers, subjugated the Alans and Circassians in the Caucasus, and then focused on the Cumans, a Turkic nomadic people who controlled the western steppes. The Cumans stood no chance. Following their defeat, their Khan, Khotan, did the only thing he could. He sought help from his son-in-law. That son-in-law was Prince Mstislav Mstislavich of Galich, historically known as Mstislav the Bold. He embodied his moniker, brave, aggressive, and perhaps lacking the necessary strategic foresight. When Khotan arrived at his court with the remnants of his shattered army, the message was dire. Today, the Mongols have seized our lands. Tomorrow, they will take yours. Now, this is where events become truly compelling. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of history's most devastating battles, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people discover these narratives. Frankly, this is the kind of history we should have learned in school, rather than just memorizing dates. Anyway, back to 1223. The Cuman warning triggered a meeting in Kiev. It's crucial to understand the nature of Kievan Rus at this period. It was not a unified nation in the modern sense. It was a loosely bound network of principalities, each governed by a local lord who nominally pledged loyalty to the Grand Prince of Kiev, yet largely operated with complete autonomy. These leaders frequently engaged in internecine conflict, as much as they battled external adversaries. Imagine the United States as 50 distinct nations, occasionally collaborating, but often warring amongst themselves, all while professing to be a single entity. It was a turbulent political landscape. When the princes convened in Kiev in early 1223, the resulting alliance appeared formidable on paper. Mstislav the Bold led his troops from Galicia. Mstislav III of Kiev, the venerable Romanovich, committed his forces. The Prince of Chernihiv, the Prince of Kursk, Daniel Romanovich of Volhynia, and the Cuman warriors under Khan Khotin all joined their ranks. In total, they amassed approximately 80,000 men, though it's crucial to remember that only about a quarter to a third of these were seasoned fighters. The remainder consisted of levies, farmers handed spears and ordered to march. However, a crucial defect, one that Subutai and Jebe would masterfully exploit, was the absence of a supreme commander. Each prince maintained control over his own contingent and made independent decisions. This was not a unified military, it was a committee armed. And as anyone involved in collaborative projects understands, committees often stifle good ideas. The Rus forces began their assembly in April 1223 at the Dnieper River's Great Bend. They arrived by vessel, horseback, and on foot, forming a colossal host that must have appeared invincible as it gathered. Concurrently, roughly 200 miles to the east, Jebe and Subutai were informed of this mobilization and made a seemingly counterintuitive choice. They dispatched emissaries. The Mongol envoys reached Kiev with an offer of peace. Their message stated they had no dispute with the Rus, were merely pursuing the Cumans, their foes, and were moving eastward, away from Rus cities, thus rendering war unnecessary. This was a perfectly reasonable proposal, the sort of diplomatic gesture that should have initiated discussions. Mstislav III of Kiev, however, ordered the ambassadors executed. This decision warrants a pause, for its implications are fascinating. 5 years prior, the Mongols had employed an identical diplomatic tactic with the Khwarezmian Shah, who, like Mstislav, had his ambassadors executed. The Shah's empire no longer existed. The Mongols hadn't sent these envoys out of a desperate desire for peace. Instead, they were constructing a legal and moral justification for their impending actions. In the Mongol perspective, the slaying of ambassadors ranked among the gravest offenses imaginable. It transformed subsequent violence from conquest into a righteous act of justice. Mstislav had effectively painted a target on every Rus city. The Mongols then sent a second embassy, which simply declared war, and then Jebe and Subutai initiated their strategy, showcasing their strategic brilliance. They positioned their primary force of approximately 20,000 horsemen to the east, leaving a rear guard of precisely 1,000 men under an officer named Hambek. Consider this for a moment. Facing an army of 80,000, they intentionally leave 1,000 men where the enemy could encounter them. This wasn't a defensive arrangement, it was bait within a trap so sophisticated it's unsettling. In late April, the massive Rus army commenced its eastward advance. They crossed the Dnieper using boats secured together, with cavalry leading, followed by infantry, forming a column that extended over 15 miles across the steppe. When Mstislav the Bold scouts spotted Hambek's rear guard across a small river, the prince acted swiftly. He crossed amidst intense arrow fire, and once his troops reached the opposite bank, their numerical superiority proved decisive. The Mongol rearguard fought valiantly, but was overwhelmed. Not a single man survived. The Rus princes were elated. They had annihilated a Mongol detachment with minimal casualties. "These Mongols aren't so formidable," they declared to each other. They're panicking. We'll overtake them in a few days and end this. And so they pursued. Oh, how eagerly they pursued. For 9 days, the Rus army chased the Mongol main force deeper into the steppe. It was here that Subutai and Jebe exemplified the strategic acumen for which they are still studied in military academies today. They retreated just quickly enough to maintain their lead, yet slowly enough to remain visible. Occasionally, they would engage in skirmishes before fleeing once more. They scattered valuables on the ground as if panicked and unable to carry them. They broke formation as if in disarray, only to reform once out of immediate danger. Every action was meticulously calculated to reinforce the Rus' conviction that they were victorious, that the Mongols were in disarray, and that triumph was just beyond the next rise. Meanwhile, the Rus army was disintegrating. The unrelenting pace under the scorching steppe sun debilitated the infantry. Men's feet were blistered and bleeding. Water reserves dwindled. Horses became lame. Most critically, the divisions among the various princely contingents became increasingly pronounced. Mstislav the Bold, known for his aggressive nature, drove his troops forward, insisting that cavalry reinforcements from other princes join him to corner and engage the Mongols. In contrast, Mstislav of Kiev, exercising caution, argued for the army to slow down, allowing the infantry to keep pace. Neither leader heeded the other. The vast host of 80,000 men devolved into a scattered, weary, and fractious multitude stretching across many miles. Yet the Mongols continued their retreat. Day after day, the Rus warriors began to question the relentless chase. Doubts surfaced. Why are we here? Why have we ventured so far from home? Nevertheless, they had advanced too far to withdraw. Their pride forbade it. They were fully committed. On the evening of May 30th, 1223, the 9th day of the pursuit, electrifying news arrived from the Rus scouts. The Mongols had halted. They were reportedly forming for battle on the banks of a small river named the Kalka. After more than 200 kilometers of frustrating pursuit, the adversary was finally prepared to stand and fight. The Rus forces, though exhausted, arrived with confidence. They fielded 80,000 men against an estimated 20,000 Mongols, making the arithmetic appear straightforward. However, as the princes established their camp, they made a succession of decisions that, in retrospect, appear to be a catalog of military blunders. They neglected to fully regroup. They failed to establish a unified command structure. They didn't even encamp together. Mstislav III of Kiev strategically positioned his 10,000 men on a defensible hill on the river's west bank, choosing not to cross. Other contingents camped near the riverbanks on both sides. A coordinated battle plan was absent. Each prince planned to act as he saw fit once morning arrived. For those with an interest in military history, this sequence of events is likely to be quite exasperating. If you find yourself in this category, please share your thoughts on other historical military mishaps I should explore, as this kind of analysis is what I enjoy most. Across the river, Subutai observed the disorganized Rus' army settling in and made his final tactical adjustments. The trap was meticulously set. 9 days of flawless execution had brought the adversary precisely to his desired location. Divided, fatigued, overconfident, and poorly deployed. The moment for impact had arrived. At dawn on May 31st, 1223, Mstislav the Bold made a decision that irrevocably determined the fate of thousands. He did not await the other princes. He did not coordinate his actions. While others were still asleep, he simply commanded his forces and their Cuman allies to cross the Kalka River and launch an assault. It was an audacious cavalry charge, precisely the kind of aggressive maneuver that had earned him his moniker. His heavily armored knights, supported by Cuman-like cavalry, galloped across the fords and crashed into what seemed to be the Mongol lines. Initially, it appeared successful. The Mongol forces directly in front scattered. The Rus and Cumans pressed forward, achieving a breakthrough, sensing imminent victory. "We're winning," must have resonated through their ranks. However, this was not a true Mongol front line. It was another rear guard, another piece of bait, and the trap was about to spring with terrifying swiftness. The main Mongol heavy cavalry had been concealed on the flanks, lying in wait. Now, they executed an inward-wheeling maneuver, so precise it suggested weeks of rehearsal. Within minutes, the Mongol wings enveloped Mstislav's forces from both sides. Concurrently, Mongol horse archers began showering arrows into the dense mass of Rus warriors from every direction. The shift from pursuit to encirclement occurred so rapidly that the Rus bringing up the rear had not even reached the battlefield before the front ranks dissolved into chaos. The Cumans were the first to grasp the unfolding catastrophe. Having previously encountered steppe nomads, they recognized the classic pincer movement, the devastating coordination, and they broke. Thousands of Cuman cavalry turned and fled back through their own allied lines, creating wide gaps and confusion. The Mongol heavy cavalry exploited these newly formed breaches, surging through like water through a broken dam. Prince Mstislav of Chernihiv, advancing with his forces, collided head-on with the panicked, retreating Cumans. His men had no inkling that the battle had even begun. Suddenly, they found themselves embroiled in a chaotic melee, unable to establish proper lines or coordinate their movements. The Mongols further magnified the confusion by deploying smoke bombs, effectively blinding the Chernihiv forces and obscuring their perception of events. The line collapsed. Prince Mstislav of Chernihiv perished in the ensuing pandemonium, cut down within the first hour. The Mongol wings completed their encirclement. The shattered Rus forces were now trapped, with their backs to the river, offering no avenue of retreat or chance to regroup. The Mongols then did what they excelled at. They systematically annihilated them. Volley after volley of arrows from composite bows capable of firing 300 meters. Cavalry charges targeting any weaknesses in the formation. Coordinated, disciplined, pitiless. This was no longer a battle. It was an execution. Mstislav the Bold, with his personal guard, managed to break through the Mongol siege and escape. He headed west, one of the rare survivors carrying the horrifying memory of what he had witnessed. The massacre continued in his wake. The armies of Galicia, Volhynia, Kursk, and Chernihiv were obliterated as fighting forces within hours. From his hilltop, Mstislav III of Kiev watched the destruction of his allied forces with increasing dread. He commanded 10,000 men, the largest remaining intact contingent. He quickly fortified his position, and when the Mongols turned their attention to him, they discovered a more formidable challenge. For 3 days, Mstislav's forces held their ground on the hill, encircled, without food or water, enduring the screams of the wounded and observing the Mongol forces encircling them like predators. On the third day, June 2nd, 1223, Mongol commanders approached under a flag of truce. They presented terms, surrender, and Mstislav and his men would be granted safe passage home. No harm would befall them. This promise was sealed with oaths. Mstislav, desperate and out of options, surrendered. The Mongols upheld their promise in the most literal, horrifying way imaginable. They did not spill noble blood, which is true. Instead, Mstislav and his boyars were bound hand and foot and laid on the ground. The Mongols then built a heavy wooden platform over them and held their victory feast on top. As Subutai, Jebe, and the other Mongol officers dined, drank, and celebrated above, the princes of Kiev slowly suffocated under the immense weight. This was retaliation for the executed ambassadors, served cold and calculated. The message was unmistakable. Breaking the rules of civilized warfare carries severe consequences. It's crucial to understand that the Mongols were not mindless barbarians. They were strategic and calculating, utilizing terror as a weapon. This execution was not mere sadism. It was psychological warfare designed to convey a message to every ruler in Rus and beyond. Do not underestimate us, and do not violate diplomatic protocols. It worked. The story of the events at the Kalka River spread rapidly, and for a generation, the Mongols became figures of dread in Russian folklore. The casualties from the Kalka River battle were staggering. Estimates for Rus and Cuman losses range from 20,000 to 60,000 killed, with some chronicles suggesting that up to 90% of the force was annihilated. Only 1 in 10 soldiers who marched east ever returned home. 9 princes perished, 3 were executed, and 6 were killed during the pursuit. Mongol casualties were minimal, making it one of history's most one-sided military victories. Mstislav the Bold reached the Dnieper River and, in an act demonstrating his panic, destroyed every boat he could find to prevent the Mongols from pursuing. However, the Mongols did not follow. They raided a few southern towns, then turned east, crossed the Volga River, and began the long journey back to Mongolia. They encountered the Volga Bulgars, suffered a defeat in an ambush, won the subsequent engagement, and ultimately rejoined Genghis Khan's main army in 1224. Jebe likely died during or shortly after this campaign, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. Subutai would go on to conquer more territory than any other military commander in human history. The Kalka River incident was not a conquest, but a reconnaissance mission. Subutai and Jebe had been testing European defenses, gathering intelligence, mapping terrain, and assessing military capabilities. They returned with detailed reports regarding the political disunity of the Rus principalities, the quality of their armies, and the nature of the landscape. It was a 3-year scouting expedition that, by chance, annihilated an 80,000-man army. 14 years later, in 1237, the Mongols returned in force. Subutai led the invasion alongside Batu Khan, Genghis's grandson. This time they were not scouting, they came to conquer, and they succeeded. Kiev fell, Chernihiv fell, Galicia Volhynia fell. The Rus principalities became vassals of what would be known as the Golden Horde. For the subsequent 240 years, Russia endured what historians term the Mongol yoke. Russian history, culture, and development were profoundly altered by this period of domination, and it might all have been avoided had someone heeded the warning delivered at the Kalka River. So what made this trap so devastatingly effective? Let's analyze it, as the lessons extend far beyond medieval warfare. First, the Mongols understood that victory is secured well before the battle commences. The feigned retreat that lured the Rus army 200 miles from home was not improvised. It was a meticulously executed plan demanding extraordinary discipline. Imagine that. For 9 days, 20,000 horsemen maintained a coordinated retreat, never breaking character, always staying just far enough ahead to keep the enemy in pursuit. Such a degree of group cohesion is practically unattainable. Secondly, they leveraged the psychology of their adversaries. The Mongols understood that the Rus princes were proud warriors who had just formed an alliance against a shared menace. They were aware these men would perceive an initial effortless triumph as confirmation of their might. Every decision made by the Mongols was meticulously crafted to bolster the Rus' overconfidence while simultaneously depleting and fragmenting them. This constitutes psychological warfare at a truly unnerving level upon closer inspection. Thirdly, mobility translates to dominance. The Mongols could sustain marches of 60 to 100 miles daily because each warrior possessed multiple horses. They could rotate their mounts, ensuring their forces remained vigorous, while the Rus army, hampered by slower infantry and supply carts, wore itself out attempting to maintain pace. In the climactic confrontation, when the Mongols needed to transition from mounted archers to heavy cavalry, they executed the change within minutes due to their pre-planned strategy. The Rus never had an opportunity to adjust. Fourth, and this cannot be emphasized enough, unified leadership is paramount. The Mongols operated as a singular entity under the guidance of Subutai and Jebe. Every unit was cognizant of its function. Every maneuver was meticulously coordinated. The Rus functioned as 10 distinct armies that occasionally collaborated. When the crisis erupted, this absence of unified command proved fatal. There's a valid reason why contemporary military doctrine stresses clear command structures. The Battle of the Kalka River serves as compelling evidence. Fifth, intelligence determines victory in conflicts. The Mongols had been compiling information about the Rus for 3 years. They comprehended the topography, the political landscape, and the military capabilities. They knew precisely how far they could push before the Rus would capitulate. The Rus, conversely, possessed almost no knowledge of their foe. They were battling blindly against an opponent who perceived everything. And finally, patience itself is a formidable weapon. Subutai and Jebe devoted 9 days to meticulously preparing a battle that concluded in less than a day. They refrained from haste. They did not improvise. They executed a plan with the surgical precision of a master strategist. In our contemporary world fixated on instant gratification, there's an almost alien quality to such profound patience in pursuit of an objective. The legacy of the Kalka River extended considerably beyond the Rus. In 1241, Mongol armies simultaneously vanquished Polish and Hungarian forces in engagements fought over the same weekend. Armies separated by over 1,000 miles, both employing variations of the tactics perfected at Kalka. They advanced within striking distance of Vienna and reached the Adriatic Sea. Only the demise of the great Khan Ogedei and the subsequent summons of all princes back to Mongolia for the succession crisis spared Western Europe from invasion. Consider that for a moment. The Mongol Empire came that close to exercising control from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic. A Russian chronicler, writing about the Kalka River, captured the sheer incomprehensibility of the events. "We know not where they came from, nor where they went. God sent them for our sins." That is the voice of a civilization that had just confronted something utterly beyond its comprehension. A force that materialized, obliterated everything in its path, and then vanished like a feverish dream. 80,000 men marched eastward into the steppe, pursuing what they believed was a defeated enemy. Fewer than 8,000 returned home. It wasn't merely a battle. It was a masterful display of deception, coordination, and ruthless efficiency. It was the quintessential trap. And here's what truly disturbs me when I delve into this history. How many other instances in history have we been absolutely convinced we were the aggressors, only to realize too late that we were always the intended targets? If this in-depth exploration of military history captivated you, I urge you to take 2 actions. First, subscribe to this channel because I cover narratives like this that, while absent from textbooks, absolutely merit recognition. And second, leave a comment detailing which other battles or historical occurrences you would like me to dissect with this level of thoroughness. Should I examine the Mongol destruction of Baghdad? The Battle of Ain Jalut, where the Mongols finally suffered a defeat? The Siege of Kaffa, where biological warfare might have initiated the Black Death? You tell me, because history isn't merely a compilation of dates and names. It comprises stories of human ingenuity and calamity, and every single one offers valuable lessons for us today. Do not permit these narratives to fade into obscurity. Share this video, disseminate the knowledge, and I will connect with you in the next installment.